As with any other creative medium, some of the most interesting tidbits in the history of video games can be found on the cutting room floor. Naturally, some of these abandoned ideas take the form of characters who, for one reason or another, never made it to the final cut. As we'll see, there are a myriad of reasons why a character may be removed from a game. Sometimes it's licensing issues, as one of the rights holders gets cold feet at the last minute. Sometimes a character ends up being a lot less fun to play than anyone expected, and sometimes a character gets sheared by a scissor-happy editing department for no apparent reason. Our first entry falls into the category of excuses, as unfortunately Square Enix denied us what would have been one of the coolest crossovers in the history of gaming. I'm Jess from WhatCulture, and here are 10 video game characters we can't believe got cut. Number 10. Cloud Strife, Soul Calibur 2. Nowadays, the Soul Calibur series is well known for its crossovers. Over the years, Namco's venerable weapon-based fighting game has seen its cast cross swords with the likes of Geralt of Rivia, Ezio Auditore, and most bizarrely, Darth Vader and Yoda. Yet this tradition didn't start with the first game. Instead, it was Soul Calibur 2 that introduced the concept of inviting strange characters from all kinds of wild and weird places to battle with the main cast. Famously, each console received its own exclusive character. GameCube owners got to play as Link, Xbox players had to make do with Todd McFarlane's Spawn, and we're still trying to figure that one out, and the PS2 crowd got Tekken's Heihachi Mishima. Heihachi was always a weird choice for Soul Calibur, given that he fights completely unarmed. However, when you realize who Namco originally wanted, Heihachi's inclusion makes more sense. The original plan was to have Final Fantasy VII's Cloud Strife be the representative from PlayStation, which would have been a huge move if they pulled it off. Cloud was, and still is, one of the most recognizable protagonists in gaming history, and this would have been his first appearance in a video game since Final Fantasy VII had released 5 years prior. Not only that, his iconically and comically large Buster Sword would have been a perfect fit for the weapon-obsessed world of Soul Calibur. Sadly, Square Enix would ultimately nix the deal, so Namco had to step in and pick somebody else to fill the slot. Number 9. Maximum Carnum, LEGO Marvel Superheroes 2. Sometimes deleted characters aren't actually deleted, such is the case with Maximum Carnum, a name that really needs to be typed in all caps to get the full effect. Those of you lucky enough to have played LEGO Marvel Superheroes 2 will remember Maximum Carnum as a boss fight in the game's campaign. But at one point, the symbiotic supervillain was slated to make an appearance as a playable character. Those with far greater technical skill than us will be able to tell you that if you rummage around in the game's files, you can actually find him sitting there as a playable character waiting to be unlocked. And indeed, with a little tinkering, you may place the red and black behemoth under your direct control. It's not an experience we'd recommend, however, as Maximum Carnum is slow. Unbelievably slow. 10 seconds spent in its company is 9 more than you need to see why the developers cut their losses and buried him in the source code, never to be found. Although a superpowered symbiote hybrid buried away only to be found by inquisitive explorers does sound a lot like a Spider-Man plot. Number 8. TUROK the Dinosaur Hunter, WWF Warzone. Good old Acclaim. Despite their name being a byword for moronic marketing stunts, this writer can't help but admit a certain fondness for the now-deceased studio. That affection springs almost entirely from TUROK 2, which introduced the world to the delights of the cerebral boar and allowed owners of N64's expansion pack to experience the eye-popping glory of 640 by 480 gaming. Hard as it may be to believe now, TUROK the Dinosaur Hunter was a very recognizable game back in the 90s. And in a neat bit of synergy, Acclaim made the decision to combine it with another cultural phenomenon that peaked around the same time, the WWF, the wrestling organization, not the World Wildlife Fund, which probably didn't want to be associated with a character whose defining trait was slaughtering a thought-to-be extinct species. TUROK was slipped away into Acclaim's very own WWF Warzone, but is playable if you happen to use the Game Shark cheat device. However, he was scrapped from the finished build for the game for reasons that have never been made clear. Maybe the WWF, now WWE, wanted the focus to be entirely on characters they owned. Or maybe it's because Warzone's TUROK was just a lazy reskin of the wrestler The Rock, and everyone involved was ashamed of themselves for such a groan-inducing pun. Number 7. Sean Connery, Roger Moore, Timothy Dalton, GoldenEye 007. 4 00s enter, only one can leave. No, that is not the plot of the next James Bond film, although now we've written it down, it sounds like a great idea. It was actually the case for the All Bonds mode for GoldenEye 007 that never came to be. All Bonds mode would have allowed 4 players to duke it out deathmatch style to finally decide who was the best James Bond. The suave Sean Connery, the charming Roger Moore, the intense Timothy Dalton, or the steely-eyed Pierce Brosnan. Now, there were 2 problems with this mode. Number 1, where the hell was George Lazenby? And number 2, the developers failed to account for the fearsome reputation of Sean Connery. Game director Martin Hollis revealed in a 2020 interview that All Bonds mode was shut down pronto by those in charge of the James Bond license, as they were genuinely worried that Sean Connery would sue everyone involved for placing his likeness in the game. This worry seems a tad unfounded. Connery had no problem granting his likeness for the PS2's From Russia with Love, but it was enough to scrap the entire project and ensure Pierce Brosnan would remain the one and only Bond in the game. Number 6. RYOTARO DOJIMA, Persona 4 Arena. When it comes to Atlus's Persona series, it's pretty much agreed, or at least it's what I think, Persona 5 Royal is the best of the bunch. That said, you can't deny the greatness of Persona 4. No other Persona game has come close to matching the uplifting, heartwarming joy engendered by the franchise's 4th entry, and no other characters embody that better than Ryotaro and Nanako Dojima. Briefly, Ryotaro is a recently widowed cop, working in the small town of Inaba and making an absolute hash of his work-life balance. This forces his adorably precious daughter Nanako to grow up fast, given he's often away from home. The pair's evolving relationship provides Persona 4's narrative arc with its greatest emotional beats, which led fighting game savants Arc Systems to theorize that the duo would be just as effective in pulverizing enemy combatants as they were at tenderizing gamers' hearts. When developing the fighting game spin-off Persona 4 Arena, Arc Systems promised to add the Dojima duo to the game as playable characters. Game director Takumi Uguchiya stated that, whereas the other fighters in Arena would be backed up by their personas, imagination-fueled super beings with godlike capabilities, Ryotaro would be assisted by Nanako, his fry-pan-wielding 7-year-old daughter. Atlus, perhaps unsurprisingly, put the kibosh on the idea when they got wind of it. Sorry Ryotaro, sorry Nanako, at least we'll always have Inaba. Number 5. Matt the Radar Technician, LEGO Star Wars The Force Awakens. Star Wars sequel trilogy may have been a little divisive, to put it lightly, but one thing generally agreed on is that Adam Driver did a great job portraying Kylo Ren. As such, it came as no surprise when the actor also knocked it out of the park, playing a spoof of the character on Saturday Night Live. If you haven't seen the skit, it's a parody of Undercover Boss, where Kylo decides to go undercover as Matt the Radar Technician to check out what life is like for the average First Order worker. Matt was such a hit that TT Games, the minds behind the LEGO Star Wars video games, wanted the Radar Technician to make an appearance in LEGO Star Wars The Force Awakens. Sadly, SNL's legal department were less than enthused with the idea and shut the whole thing down like a womp rat on Tatooine. Maybe SNL were worried about opening a can of worms and then seeing their characters in other video games, but honestly, that sounds pretty great to us. Number 4. Dr. Octopus, Marvel vs. Capcom 3. Doc Ock has starred in many a video game over the years, but becoming a playable character in the Marvel vs. Capcom series was apparently a step too far. Unlike TUROK in WWF Warzone and the character models for Connery et al. In GoldenEye 007, there isn't enough left of Doc Ock in the game's code to reconstruct him through technical wizardry, which is a surprise considering how far along in development the character was. MVC3 producer Ryota Nitsuma took to Twitter a few years ago to discuss the characters who didn't make the final roster, and he revealed that, of all the rejects, it was Doc Ock who came closest to the finished product before being axed. Nitsuma said they had Doc Ock's art and theme song all ready to go, but the character was eventually axed due to technical difficulties. Given that Nitsuma also revealed the 6-armed assassin Spiral was cut due to being an absolute nightmare to animate, we can only assume Otto's signature tentacles provided a similar hassle for the game's animators. As such, Doc Ock exists in MVC3 only as a name in an internal database. Number 3. TMNT'S Michelangelo, the LEGO Movie video game. If there's one thing that writing this article has taught us, it's that the world of licensing is fraught with bizarre rules and regulations. Take the case of Michelangelo, the turtle, not the actual Renaissance man. Michelangelo is not an official part of the LEGO Movie video game, as Warner Brothers couldn't sort out a licensing deal with Nickelodeon for the character to appear, even though it was fine and dandy for him to show up in the film itself. What's really odd here is that the developers actually went to the effort of making Michelangelo playable before finding out whether or not they had permission to use him. His code was still in the game's files, and he can still be unlocked by those with sufficient technical know-how. Between this, TUROK, and the All Bonds farrago, we do wonder why game developers waste so much time on developing characters before they know if they'll be able to use them. Number 2. Link and Samus, Marvel Ultimate Alliance. Before Smash Bros. Made it perfectly normal for Nintendo characters to duff up other companies' intellectual property, Activision planned a crossover that would have become the stuff of legends. Before porting Marvel Ultimate Alliance to the Wii, Activision had a very interesting video to show the bigwigs at Nintendo. Said video wound up being a pitch to add Nintendo icons Link and Samus Aran to the game. Samus and Iron Man comparing power armor, Link and Captain America clashing shields. Sign us up. We're not sure what prompted Activision to come up with this utterly glorious idea, but we can guess. Remember, this was back in 2006, 2 years before Marvel would revolutionize the movie industry with Iron Man and the MCU. Marvel Comics was seen as strictly niche interest, so it makes sense that Activision would want to give Wii players an additional incentive to purchase the game, especially as the Wii version was notably inferior to its counterparts on other more powerful consoles. Sadly, Nintendo, ever stingy with its own IP, shut the idea down. However, given Marvel's staggering level of success since then, we wonder if Nintendo would be quite so unwilling to join forces nowadays. Smash Bros. Avengers, anyone? Number 1. Ash Williams, Mortal Kombat 11. While we're on the topic of star-studded crossovers, has anyone seen how intensely crossover-friendly the Mortal Kombat series has gotten these days? Mortal Kombat 11's DLC-furnished roster is a glorious smorgasbord of 80s-infused ultra-violence. RoboCop, Rambo, the Terminator, all there and all perfectly gelling with Mortal Kombat's bloodthirsty aesthetic. However, there's one notable bastion of barbarity missing from this list of 80s icons, and that's the king himself, Ash Williams. To be fair, this wasn't for lack of trying from NetherRealm Studios, Mortal Kombat's developers. They knew as well as anyone that Ash was a perfect fit for the game. Hell, the trailer for the first DLC ends with the trademark chainsaw revving up in the background. Sadly, ye old legal difficulties once again reared their ugly head, with Bruce Campbell himself revealing that Ash's Mortal Kombat debut was quashed by, and we quote, legal crap. That's the end of our list, but let me know down in that comment section if you can think of any other examples of video game characters that you can't believe got cut. As always, I've been Jess from WhatCulture. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. If you like, you can come say hi to me on my Twitter account where I'm at Jess McDonald, but make sure you stay tuned to us here for plenty more gaming goodness.